thought of many ways on how I wanted to share this information, and I even thought, would we want to share this information? But I think after everything's kind of moved past us at this point, I would like to be open about something that has happened to our family and what we have just recently experienced, because I don't want for us this to just be something that we try to move past. I would like it to be expressed openly. I had just recently had a miscarriage. I was 7 weeks pregnant. It's really early on, but I did have a miscarriage. I've never experienced that before. Overall, my pregnancy experience with Reagan was really smooth. Things have been generally quick and easy to conceive once again. The hardest part, I think, was just being on top of a calendar. But once everything seemed to be going fine. I had tested positive for my pregnancy about 3 weeks and 5 days. And I had a feeling I was pregnant, not because of any sort of signs or symptoms at the time in which I had tested, but just because we were tracking it, we were trying, and I had thought, if I'm gonna test positive, today's the day kind of thing. Oh my goodness. I need to get dressed. Will just left with Reagan, but we have some news to share. Hopefully you already know, but it's looking pretty good. It's looking very minimal, but good. Do you see it? Do you see it? I feel like you think I'm crazy. Okay, so I don't know if the light is hitting it right, but there is a very tiny, tiny line in this circle window. It's very light blue. So I double checked yesterday, and guess what? This one has 2 lines, which means we're pregnant, and we're gonna have another baby, and Reagan's gonna be a big sister. We weren't sure when we wanted to share the news. I think we wanted to wait and share it until we had an ultrasound picture. I had placed an order for Promoted to Big Sister t-shirt for Reagan, and once that had come in the mail, then I was able to put it on her, and then we were able to take pictures of her and share those pictures and videos and whatnot with our family. It was very exciting to kind of get our family's reactions on it. Everybody's been asking when the next one would be coming, so I think collectively it was known to happen. We were open that we wanted it to happen. But as far as posting it online for further friends, I guess, to see, we wanted to wait till we had an ultrasound picture to at least show. The plan, at least in my head, was to wait till we were maybe about 8-9 weeks along and explain it that way. So I tried to record my thoughts and experiences as I was going through the last couple weeks, but it's been a little difficult to get quite all the emotion recorded and snapped, because I had, at the same time as I'm going through things, I'm trying not to psych myself out and focus too much on what I'm feeling, but just kind of stick more to facts. A lot of TMI here, but I had experienced cramping on a Sunday leading into last week, and I had a lot of discharge where it was just clear fluid, nothing concerning. I honestly had thought, oh, it's probably my body in overdrive because of the hormones and everything. But it did at a certain point in that day kind of have a slight color change to it. And I thought, okay, maybe that's, again, still normal. It wasn't until Tuesday that I had noticed after I went to the bathroom, that I wiped what started to not look brown, but what started to look pink. And I thought, oh my God, pink like blood? What's going on? And maybe an hour and a half after that, next time I went to the bathroom, there was no doubt, it was blood. And so I had called, it was my second time actually at that point, calling the doctor, and I had said to them, like, there's no doubt that I'm bleeding right now. And they had rescheduled my 8-week appointment to the very next morning at like 7. And so I got Reagan off to school, and my sister was able to come with me to that appointment. And I had been bleeding that the whole Tuesday. It just got heavier and heavier, and I was on a pad, and I was convinced without being convinced that, like, this seems like I'm on a period. This doesn't seem normal. And I thought I was having a miscarriage at that time because of the bleeding, and I was convinced they were gonna say, there's no baby, there's no heartbeat. But as soon as they put me on the ultrasound, immediately they saw the baby. They're like, nope, your baby's right here. And they're like, heartbeat of 130, doing very well, measuring exactly 7 weeks on the dot, based on what you believe, due date October 5th, everything looks great. And then they're like, let's go see what this bleeding is. And so I'm not super knowledgeable in this medical side, so if you've been through this, maybe you can kind of speak to it more. But they had determined I was having a subchorionic hemorrhage, which is the leading cause of bleeding for a woman in the first trimester of a pregnancy. And basically, between the chorionic membranes and the uterine wall, there is bleeding taking place. And if I understand this part correctly, it's not bleeding within the placenta. The baby theoretically is fine. It's you, the mom, who's bleeding. Most of the time, it either goes away on its own, and they believed that they didn't need to do an ultrasound till I was 12 weeks along because the hemorrhage did not measure that large. They felt pretty confident with the size of the baby and the heart rate that it should be clear by at around 12 weeks, and I'll come back for the ultrasound, which would be a normal routine appointment at that time anyway. And they'll double check to make sure the bleeding has stopped. They believed it was going to subside going into the weekend. But then there's this other half of the group where it doesn't go away and it gets bigger. And if it gets bigger and the bleed is so large, the placenta will detach. And at that point, you are having a miscarriage. Being that everything looks so good on that Wednesday, they said, let's do some labs just for peace of mind. Let's take your vitals and whatnot today, your hormone levels. They said, we'll take your HCG, we'll take your progesterone just to make sure that you are having good levels, because sometimes I've heard people have had supplements for that. That had come back the very next day, and that was fine. And the HCG, which is your pregnancy-producing hormone, that's the hormone that makes you test positive on a pregnancy test. That hormone was measuring great for 7 weeks. It looked good. In 48 hours, they expect that measurement should double. And so they had me come back on Friday to take another round of labs for that hormone. After I went home on Wednesday from the ultrasound, I continued to experience bleeding. It seemed like it was getting heavier, and by late evening, it was heavier. I was soaking a pad like every 2 hours. It felt heavier than a period because of the turnaround time in which I was changing the pads. And it was late that night when I was actually talking to Will on FaceTime, and I was wiping away, just sitting there, again, TMI, sitting there on the toilet, wiping away these clots, and they were the size of smashed marbles. And I probably wiped what felt like 4 of them away. And it was that and blood on the tissue paper. It was so much. And Will was saying, why don't you just take a shower? And I remember saying to him, because I don't think I can get upstairs without making a mess. And I told him I was going to call the doctor again. It was after hours at this point, so they had a midwife call me back. And the midwife had explained that it's very possible that the bleeding is getting heavier because of the hemorrhage and to just rest easy. She said that she was trying to discourage concern because the recommendation would be at that hour to go to an emergency room. And she said, because I don't want you to go to an emergency room in case this is just solely the hemorrhage, she had said, just give us a call back if the clots become the size of a golf ball or you're soaking a pad every 1 hour. I now know that the experience wasn't as good as it could have been. The doctors and their words, they weren't rude. They didn't make me feel silly for calling, but I just think now knowing what I know, I think you know your own body best, and there was something going on. The bleeding, it got a lot lighter by morning. In comparison, it felt like I was back to a pad every 4 hours, maybe. I don't know. I change them too often, so it's hard to really gauge. By morning, it seemed to just be like a normal period, no more clots. And that's how it kind of had been pretty much until maybe yesterday. It's been pretty steady in that manner. I thought we're past the bleeding. It's looking good. We're getting better. But when we saw the results, me and Will on Sunday, we just kept Googling, like, can you have HCG that low? They had called me Monday morning and said, your HCG levels have dropped so significantly. Come in for an ultrasound. They said they want to follow the levels down to 0. And that's kind of when I had asked, oh, follow it down to 0. You mean I've had a miscarriage? And so they're like, oh, you didn't know? And so I think for that reason, I haven't been a big fan of this particular practice, and we'll probably shop around in the future here. Will had left work immediately. I took off of work suddenly, and we went to this appointment within 30 minutes, and they confirmed there is no baby there. They don't see it. Baby's gone. And then they had said there is tissue left behind. They believe that should pass. When you've had a miscarriage, you either pass everything on your own, maybe with medical assistance, such as a pill of some sort to encourage contractions, but generally you pass everything on your own, or you don't, in which case you get what is called a D&C. Usually, because it's a pretty invasive process, they try to discourage the D&C or put it off as long as possible. So they will wait up to 4 weeks to allow your body to do what it needs to do. So I'm right now in this waiting phase to see if the remaining tissue passes. And they said it's going to be like barely noticeable because there's not a lot and it's small. So unless I'm really focusing on what's coming out of me, I probably am not going to notice too much, but the bleeding hopefully will taper off as well. And pretty much it has. I have just a panty liner on at this point, but I have to go back next week for another ultrasound to make sure everything is in fact out and I'm good to go at this point. The week I was bleeding was really stressful because I kept questioning what was happening and fearing for the worst. And then I felt as kind as the midwives were, I felt not brushed off, but told it's acceptable that I'm experiencing this issue, the bleeding and so forth. It's acceptable based on what I'm seeing as the bleed. But there's too many outliers in the world who throw off statistics and make something that isn't normal somehow arguably normal. And I think the midwives and the doctors, I think they learned to speak to these outliers as if they're the masses. They tell you, no, that bleeding that heavy is totally acceptable. The clots, they're totally acceptable with a hemorrhage. What they don't, I think, realize is not with a hemorrhage my size, and not after it suddenly gets heavier. And while I might not be bleeding so much that I'm gonna die, don't we think the bleeding is so heavy and severe that the baby's not okay? I don't think that would have somehow helped me in the moment, if I had some sort of person or even my own thoughts reassuring me, like, no, you think you're having a miscarriage, Casey, you are having a miscarriage. Like, do you feel better? I don't think that it would have made me feel any better. I think that because I didn't feel that something was right, I feel better knowing I was correct with that thinking. And what we can't know, and only God knows, is, did the hemorrhage start as a result of my body's way of trying to end the pregnancy because something about it was not viable? And the hemorrhage we saw and the bleeding I had first experienced on Tuesday was that my body's way of ending things. And then when we had done the ultrasound and saw a baby in there that looked good, was that because my body hadn't really continued on or had enough time to continue doing what it was trying to do? Or did I have a hemorrhage and did it cause my baby to pass? And we don't know that. So I have the pictures of the baby measuring at 7 weeks, and I have the picture of the hemorrhage, and I have my positive pregnancy test, and we have Reagan's big sister shirt. We have these signs that there was a baby, but we know that there's not a baby anymore, and we know that I'm gonna stop testing positive on my pregnancy test. The life that was there with the heart beating is no longer there. We're doing okay. We're doing okay. I think we're doing better than maybe is expected. I don't know if that's right, but I wanted to share that because I want, even though we didn't have this baby for long, I want it to be known that they were loved, and I was super excited to meet them, and we both were ecstatic when we found out, and the idea of growing our family is really moving for us, and so we really wanted them here, and we would do anything to have them here today still, but it's not that way, and we are healing as much as we can emotionally. I don't really know how to end this. I'm very positive that come next week's appointment, things will look normal and life will go on as it should. I'd be surprised if there's any issues next week's appointment, but we'll just keep going and keep you updated as much as we can otherwise.